Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Today we have a friend with us, Jeff Rust, who Jeff's been friends with Kirk and I for a long time. I've known Jeff, I'm not sure how many years, Jeff, maybe 15, maybe more, maybe 20 years. Jeff runs a group called TRUSS, and TRUSS is this amazing networking and relationship building group that I've been a part of for as long as I can remember almost, Jeff. So many of my friends have come through TRUSS and the predecessor to TRUSS, which was Corporate Alliance. And so, Jeff, we think the world of you, and you are the ultimate relationship builder for sure. And we're excited to talk to you today about being a dad.
I'm excited. This is a real honor. Thank you.
So, Jeff, maybe a little bit of background of how you are tied into the Gentleman Project. And I'm happy to talk about that. When I started my business in suits, I recognized very quickly that most people were not interested in talking about fashion or suits at a networking event. It's kind of a boring subject. So I would use the opportunity that I had sitting around these tables of networking to ask people what they were doing to connect with their kids, because I had kind of started the Gentleman Project at my house and recognized that there were some neat things that I was able to do and share with other people. And I wanted to know what those other ideas were. So the kind of the predecessor to the Gentleman Project lunch group and the whole idea of sharing with others what you were doing to connect with your kids started at the events that you put on with Corporate Alliance. So the roots of my experience as a dad, kind of talking to other dads and other parents about what they were doing, started there. And I think that was, it was very powerful for me to be able to talk to others in a business setting and recognize that these discussions don't get had very often. And so thank you for your part in that and the facilitating of those types of events that were open to conversations about family. Is always very family centered, which I appreciated very much. So everybody knows how I know Jeff. About 10 years ago, he introduced me to a way that I was able to plug in. And I can honestly say that my business today probably only exists because of the networking I was able to do and the friends I was able to make at those events. So thank you, Jeff, for making my professional life possible. Tell everybody a little bit about your journey as a dad. I know you lived the life of a dad of boys for a long time, and I'm anxious to kind of dig into how life looks now, how it's changed, the dynamic of your kids and the things that they're going through right now. So tell us a little bit about the Rust family and the Rust kids.
Well, I may give a little background. So I grew up the oldest of five. I have four sisters. And so, I was that annoying brother that was always in trouble because I was always pestering my sisters. And then I was in trouble because they couldn't fight back, because brothers fight. Brothers and sisters, brothers just get in trouble. And so when I was blessed with five boys, I felt like, oh, this is God just saying, hey, you suffered through girls. Now you're going to be blessed with boys. And so I had these five sons. We have 5 sons in 7 years. And at the same time, we were starting running a business. And so as I look back, I think how amazing my wife really was, kind of through that whole process. And moms and little boys have a special bond, and dads and boys, it's a more special bond as you get older, as I'm starting to experience them as teenagers now. Well, we had 5 boys in 7 years, then we had a 7-year gap, and then we had a little girl. And dads and daughters, oh my gosh, that is where the ultimate joy really is found. And so I'm blessed with a little girl. And my wife, when she said she wanted to have another one, I said, another one or two? And she said, we'll take them one at a time. So we had one, and then we thought, we'll see if another one comes. And 4 years later, we had another little girl. So we've got 2 little girls now and 5 boys. So I'm that old guy, when everybody sees me as my kids, thinks that they're all my grandkids, and really they're my kids. So it's kind of fun that way.
We both know that you do not look like a grandpa. So 7 kids. That means, you've seen lots of different phases. How old's the oldest and the youngest? I know is like a month or something, right?
Yeah, the youngest is 2 months now. The oldest is 18. And
18.
So we've got 11 to 18 in our boys, and
everyone's still at home.
Everyone's still home. Our 18-year-old is out serving a church mission, so he's in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
He was gone when the baby was born. So he's like, this is crazy. I'm meeting my sister via Zoom.
So, we're going to just hit you with a ton of critical questions today, basically.
You bet. Bring him on.
Well, I think we should maybe start with the one that Kirk, kind of out of tradition, Kirk, the one that you asked when you were in critical questions at TRUSS and Corporate Alliance. So, Jeff, I know you're a busy entrepreneur. I know your life fairly well at work. How do you connect with your kids? How do you and your wife connect with your kids? What's worked? What hasn't worked?
Well, I am very blessed with an amazing wife who is very organized. And so, some of the things that we do as a family, I say we, and it's a lot of times 99% her and 1% me. But there are a few things that I've tried to do. One thing that I try to do is I try to have a regular time with my kids, and that regular time is something one-on-one with them. And as they've gotten older, it's easier to have that be, sporting events, and the drive to and from is probably the best time to have an engaging conversation, because we're going to a place that we're both excited about and they're open to talking to me. And then, I do actually try to schedule an actual heart-to-heart one-on-one where we're going to talk about, set things, how's it going with their friends, how are they dealing with some of the issues that they're dealing with their lives, and if they've got something going on, we'll have that more regularly. But I do have, I say I do it once a month. It's probably once every other month, that we get together and have a chat.
So you do that with each kid separately, or do you do that somewhat together?
No, I do it with each kid separately.
Okay.
And so, it's age appropriate, when I'm talking to my 11-year-old, it's quite a bit different than talking to my 16-year-old. And when I'm talking to my 4-year-old, we're oftentimes, it's a little girl, we're talking about, My Little Pony, and she's using her imagination, and it's just more than anything, it's just the time to connect with them.
Yeah. It's kind of creating that dialogue that I can talk to my dad about anything. It doesn't matter if it's, toys or whatever. He's been there since I can remember. That's a cool thing to do. So talk to us about kind of how the rubber meets the road there. Is that like a Sunday during the month? Is that a Saturday morning? How do you schedule that with each one of them?
So it depends on the topic. So there's a Sunday, in our house, Sunday's more of a little bit of a calm day, and so there's some time carved out that I can do that with them, and that they'll do it with me. But there are certain times where there's topics that I want to talk to them about, that being in the car is a better place to do it. And the reason that being in the car is a better place to do it is that, no one's going to run into the room, or nothing's going to come up because we're driving. It's just me, and it's usually me and him if we're having one of these conversations, and those tend to be the heavier conversations, the birds and the bees conversation is had multiple times with kids to help bring clarity and really just to make it comfortable for them to talk about things, and I just remember my 11-year-old when he had the bright-eyed aha, like, oh my, like, you knew he got it. And it was heavy, for him, but it's one of those things where then they can talk about it with dad or with mom, and, cause they're bombarded with all kinds of things out there in the world. And so I'd love for them to feel comfortable, be able to talk to us. And, there are times where I find stuff on their phones, and it's like, we need to have a chat about that. And not that you're in trouble, because it's your life. I just want to teach you to how to make good choices in life, because I've got a friend whose life was ruined because he got addicted to porn when he was a teenager. And, that addiction to porn led to a drug addiction, which led to him losing his family and becoming homeless, and a life of crime that, he's, thanks to the Other Side Academy and some other things in his life, he's kind of turned around, but he still has that constant battle of that addiction. And so with my kids, I'm just trying to help them in their teenage years to have the strength to make good choices, because I think that's a tough place in this world with all that they've got at their fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to hit you with something you probably haven't thought about, but I was actually looking at social media this morning and I saw a post that you made, and it was from, I believe, yesterday. And I'm guessing that there was probably some lessons that you got to teach your sons about losing like a winner.
Yeah.
Yesterday. Will you walk us through what you did, what happened, and how you made that a teaching moment?
So I've got, my second son. So all my sons are pretty athletically talented, but my second son is a D1 prospect for basketball. And so he's been on a lot of successful winning teams. And he's a junior in high school now. And his younger brother is a sophomore, also on the team. And they played the 5th ranked nationally team last night, Wasatch Academy, who's just, it's a special program. Like you line up those guys versus our high school team, and it's just a David and Goliath experience on every single guy. It's unbelievable. Well, with a minute and a half left in the game, it was a 2-point ball game. We were down by 2. Donovan Mitchell's at the game. It was an unbelievable ball game, and they ended up losing, but it's 100% a moral victory, but as you get done with those games, and I look at my son hanging his head coming out of the locker room, he's their best player on the team, and he didn't have the best offensive night. And I said, so what's going on? He goes, I feel like I let my team down. I said, what do you mean you let your team down? I said, it was critical what you did out there on defense. He says, yeah, but I need to do more. I need to do more on offense. And I think that that in life we feel that way, that we're so hard on ourselves on the things that we're falling short on. That oftentimes we'll learn more from a loss than we ever will from a win. But to sit back and to celebrate the things that you're doing well. And Craig Manning, I don't know if you guys know or met Craig Manning. Craig talked about the fearless mind, how you need to highlight 3 things you do well and 1 thing that you're going to improve on. And I try to do that with my kids. And it seems like after a loss, it's got to be like 10 things that you do right. And we're not going to work on anything, because in their mind, they're thinking about all the things that they did wrong. And we have to counteract that.
I think that's good advice. I think of you as a person who is kind and considerate and well-spoken, and you've developed this amazing ability to help people build relationships and to build relationships with people. Talk to us a little bit about what made you who you are and what your parents did as you were growing up, some of the lessons learned or things that you're thankful for or things that maybe you wish would have been different. But just talk to us about your upbringing and how those things shaped who you are a bit.
Well, I've been really fortunate. Well, thank you for the kind compliment, but I've been really fortunate to have amazing parents. And when people meet my parents, they go, oh, wow, incredible people. And my parents lived in Russia for 13 years. And so there were a lot of people in my professional life who did not know my parents. And as they've since returned from Russia and have been more in the community and people have an opportunity to interact with them, they start to see, where the kind of the greatness of the company and some of the blessings that we have in our life came from. But I grew up in a small town in eastern Utah, small rural farming community. And there's something about growing up in a small town that it gives you a sense of community that you don't necessarily have in the city as much. There's always a little bit of a community, but when everyone knows everyone and everyone knows everyone's business, there's good and bad of that. There's also always chores to be done. And so you learn that it's important to work. And then when you do get to play, it feels like a total celebration because there are always chores to be done. We moved from the city or from the country to the city when I was in junior high. And that was incredibly challenging to go from a small town to the city. In fact, my parents have lived in New Orleans, Louisiana, Moscow, Russia, as I mentioned, for a lot of years. My mom grew up in Orderville, Utah, and then we lived in Altamont. My mom still says the hardest move was the move from Altamont to West Jordan. And I said, like, more so than Louisiana or Moscow, Russia? And she says, yeah, because we went from the country to the city. And there's just a big difference from that. But I'm grateful for those country roots because it just helps you appreciate that people have to look out for each other. And so the fact that we live in the city, I'm just trying to think of things that I try to instill in my own kids, that is the fact that we can do hard things. You know, working on a farm, you just like, that's just what happens. And one of those things that you've got to look outside yourself, and you have to be kind. And I'm grateful that I learn more sometimes from my kids, because my kids, I've got some boys that are studs, and I'll hear stories sometimes of when they stood up for a guy that was needing to be stood up for because he couldn't stand up for himself. And that's when I'm like, all right, we're winning. And that's Grandpa's influence has made it through me to him. And that's a real positive when things like that happen.
Do you have anything that you guys do to kind of get back to those country roots?
I would say that sports have replaced, farming in a lot of ways, and it's one of those things where as a kid, like, you were grateful for when you had practice because you didn't have to do chores, and so it's, unfortunately, sports is 100% of what's replacing that. And there's, from a scheduling standpoint, even as we look at travel and times we do things as a family trip, I've got a son that's my sophomore son's really good at football and plays basketball. And then my son that's a junior is a year-round basketball kid. There are 3 weeks a year where there are at least 4 days where we can get away with the entire family. And so, I've got a neighbor next door that is unbelievable. 86 years old. He's in his yard 7 to 8 hours a day. Unreal. The guy at 86 years old. And he has 4 sons. And he's like, when I remember out working in the yard, he's like, where are your boys? Like, you got to get your boys out here. I'm like, Richard, I know that they do too. I said, but they're at practice or they're recovering from practice. Like, there's a balancing act that we have to do with the sports in their lives. And I would say that farming is the best teacher. Sports is probably number 2 or number 3. And just based on kind of where we're at in the situation that we have, that we're having to take that sports alternative.
Hey, I want to go back to, you're looking at your kids' phones and making sure, and I'm sure at their grades, and you're trying to figure out, do they have the right friends? The same things that I'm dealing with. And so I want to go back to that and just kind of ask you, how are you? You're having these one-on-ones and the conversations in the car, which is great. But tell us how you how you talk to your kids. And what I mean by that is, there's this delicate balance between, I want you to understand that I'm setting rules and I'm setting expectations and I'm asking you all these questions because I love you. But certainly as teenagers, especially, they many times think of that as, oh my gosh, mom and dad are so strict and so they don't trust me and whatever. So talk to us maybe a little bit about what your conversations sound like, or some of the things that you do so that your kids know, you're doing it from a place of love and concern and safety, which is what I try to tell my kids. But I would love to hear maybe how you do it. Maybe there's something I can glean from that,
Well, I think we're all learning. And, I was talking to my son the other day who's on a mission and asking for some advice from him, because he was the oldest and, he got the rockiest path because it's like the first time we had it, happened with him. And the situation with one of my other sons that I needed some advice, my 13-year-old son. And I reached out to him and he gave me some of the most amazing advice. And I thought, man, there is incredible wisdom in these kids. And so I needed to ask them more. And I came away from that thinking, I need to do a better job with my questions and less with my teaching. And so I've been trying to be better about questions of what's going on in their lives. And what have you learned from that? And what would you teach your brothers who are older and are younger because of that experience? And that's one thing that's a recent aha that I've had. A second thing that I would say is, from an early time, we tried to teach our kids that, hey, it's their life and they've got to make the decisions and live with the decisions. And that sounds great until there's consequences that are pretty heavy. And growing up on a farm, you learn to drive at a very young age on tractors. And the consequence is pretty heavy if the tractor goes through the fence, or if it goes, into the ditch and tips over, or into the canal. And, you just learn those lessons by having it happen wrong once. And then you get cussed out, and then you don't ever do it again. So we thought, well, how are we going to teach our kids to drive? And because some of the heavy experiences that can happen are in a car crash, or stupid things that happen in a car. So we bought a golf cart early on, and the whole essence of the golf cart was we're going to teach these kids how to drive. And so I had a little driving test, and, at age 8 is when they could take the driving test, when they could drive on their own with friends. And our neighbor's like, I can't believe your kids are driving their golf cart around. But it's a lesson experience. And I had, my oldest son, he ran over a car, or ran over a kid's bike, had to pay to replace the kid's bike. Now that's a painful experience for a kid who's 12 to have to earn $180. It took him like 3 months to earn it to pay for the bike. And, but those lessons pay off down the road because he never had an accident with his car, other things like that. And so we try to find experiences where they can fail and feel the pain, and not have it be something that puts them under so deep that they can't get out.
Yeah, I like this idea of, I do the same thing. I try to explain the consequences of actions before those actions happen, right? Or come up with consequences, and try to explain to them that, hey, that's what real life is like. My poor little girl who's 15 hasn't seen her cell phone in like 3 months. Because that was a consequence of some other things, right? Mainly grades. And you hope that your kids understand that I'm coming from a place of love. I'm trying to show you what the real world's like. And I like what you said. I'm trying to show you before the consequences are major, right? Like paying for the bike's kind of minor. Having your cell phone taken away for a few months, pretty minor, But as you go through life, if you can learn that now, hopefully we're keeping you from the astronomical consequences that could come when you get older and the decisions are bigger.
Yeah. Well, and I try to share, you don't want to share all of the stupid things that you did because you don't want to give ideas, but you want to share enough that they realize, hey, Dad was a kid once too and made dumb mistakes, and
Right.
and he can come through it. And there were plenty, that I made, and that kind of humanized. I just think of one time I was talking in the car with my son and it's my oldest, and I just knew he was wrestling with some stuff. And I talked about an issue that was pretty heavy, of a mistake that I'd made that was pretty gnarly, that honestly, I don't share with very many people. And he needed to hear it because he needed to realize that, hey, you can get through things and come out on top. It's not real fun. You get muddy and it's tough to get clean, but you have to sometimes go through those things. And I don't know, the more, that you can get real with them, because there's just so much raw in the world right now that I don't know. It's a tough time to live. I did not envy my kids' life right now. I think we had it pretty amazing when we were kids, like we didn't worry about having to go to war. Like I think about my dad was kind of in that Vietnam era. My grandpa was in World War II. Like we didn't have, for the most part, wars we had to worry about when we were kids. And we didn't have social media and cell phones that we had to deal with. And our kids have like this onslaught with social media, but they have to be on it, because if you're not, then it's even lonelier, I think, for some of them, because that's where their friendship group is. But figuring out that balance is a real tough thing, because we don't have the experience of it.
Yeah, we're kind of the last generation that grew up without technology. So we're trying to raise kids that are fully immersed in it now. And that is a challenge I don't know that anybody can avoid right now if they're trying to raise teenagers like all three of us are.
Well, and that's why I think actually having authentic conversation with them and asking them, hey, what's some of the good things that you've seen, and what are some best practices, and turning them into the teacher. If we can have those kinds of moments around the dinner table, or, somewhere that feels safe, that's a pretty powerful experience.
Yeah. I need to take your lead on the asking questions. I found myself the other day talking to my daughter for an extended period of time versus why do you think that was a good decision? Why do you think that was a bad decision? What could we do different? I like your approach of, hey, how would you handle this if it was your little sister or your little brother or whatever, right? I like that a lot. Jeff, one of the things in our family that we struggle with is how fast to give the social media to them, or give, the technology to them or the computer. And quite frankly, my wife has been good for me because she's the one that always says, Cory, we have to teach them. We can't just not give them Instagram and other social media until they're 18, because they'll be a complete mess and they won't have any time for us to be there as they get influenced by those things. So any advice on what's worked or hasn't worked as far as how fast does that come? And then how, how often do you review what they're looking at, and how closely do you monitor that kind of a thing?
So this goes back to the country roots where, farming and using guns kind of went hand in hand too. There were always things that you had to kill the potguts and the prairie dogs and things like that from the field standpoint. And then there was the sport side of it. You grew up with a gun and an understanding of a gun. And in the city, it's a little bit different. And I'm looking at my kids thinking, man, I've got to teach them so that they aren't scared of a firearm, but they know how to handle one. And then I thought about, technology and social media as probably the same as a firearm. And your wife's got a great way of teaching that. My kids, the way we did it with cell phones is we gave them a phone. Whoever was the oldest in the school that they were at got the phone. So it tended to be, if there was a kid in 6th grade in elementary, we had to have somebody that we could communicate with. And so that oldest one was 6th grade. Our youngest one right now is in 5th grade, and he's the only one in elementary and has been, for 2 years. And so he got it the very, very youngest. And that one is the one I'm most scared about, because I see some things that he's doing, and we have to take it away and talk about it. And I take the phone from him a lot more often than I have anyone else, because it's teaching moments. The social media side, it's one of those things where, sports has driven that timing more than anything else, because as they register for certain club things, they're asked for their Instagram handle and their Twitter handle and their Instagram name. And as they put those on there, I'm thinking, my goodness, why do they need to have that? But that's hey, it's my turn. And so we begin the conversation of what are you on? And they're so good at being able to hide things that are inappropriate. Like I used to think I just would scroll through their text messages, and they know to clear their history, their viewing history and stuff like that. And so for me, it's more reading the body language and seeing when and where they're viewing things, and how obsessed are they with their phone, and how quick to be angry about their phone being taken away are they? Because if they're real quick, then I'm worried that there's some things going on, and I say we got to go through it. And I don't know. I feel like I may have a D grade, as far as how well I handle the social media thing. But I look at it going, it's a daily fight, and just like it is much easier to gain weight than it is to lose weight. As soon as you stop the workout routine, it gets out of hand. And I think that's social media. You got to stay vigilant every day in having conversations.
Some good advice, Jeff. I like that. I love the analogy with a firearm. Both are just as dangerous. Left unchecked, left unattended, and left uneducated. Both can be very destructive. As I spent a lot of time around you, networking, there were always books and things like that you recommended. You were very well read. You were always trying to find curriculum and things to teach. If I were to ask you, in Jeff Rust's library of books that have influenced your life the most, which book would you recommend?
Well, there's a huge recency bias that happens. I'm like, I just read a book that's incredible. And you're going to see that. In fact, I've got it right here on my desk. I'm in the middle of the book, and Randy Garn, I think we all know and love Randy Garn, is the one he actually sent this to me. And I had seen it on Amazon, and I think it was in my wish list, and I got it. And I thought, well, I'm excited to read it. And I'm a couple of days into this, and I can't put it down. And I am super, super excited. It's Think Like a Monk. I think that it's a book that for me has been unbelievable on working on training your mind. And that's the one thing that I'm trying to help my kids understand, is that, you've got this powerful tool in your mind, and how are you using it? And so that's probably the one right now that is at the very top of the list. Again, like I said, there's some recency bias that's there. My son, before he went on a mission, I shared David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. I don't know if, there's a clean version. It's the clean version that I had, but it was one of those things for him. I wanted him to understand that he's going to live away from home for 2 years. It's going to be hard. And you've got to understand that hard things can help you if you understand and attack them in the right way. And I think that book was probably, instrumental for him. My son that plays basketball, Jay Billis's Toughness is a great book that, again, just talks about mental toughness. So anything in my mind that helps them with the growth mindset. So I was telling my sons about this book, and my oldest son says, that sounds like a Kevin Santiago book. And Kevin Santiago was his basketball coach and was always having these boys read books on the growth mindset. And so that's for me something that I try to, focus on. Obviously there's a lot of religious stuff that I try to push my kids towards, but outside of that realm, Think Like a Monk is one that I'm a big proponent of right now.
I'm excited to read that one. I haven't heard of Think Like a Monk, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Along the same lines there, Jeff, is there somebody in your life that you look to as your main mentor? Is there somebody that you think of, whether it be a father figure or just a mentor in your life, that has made the most impact in your growth as a man?
So when I was a boy, my dad got a job transfer. This was kind of the beginning of moving around a lot for my parents. And it was going into my senior year of high school. And I was captain of the basketball team. I was dating the head cheerleader. I had like the dream high school experience is what I was in the middle of. And my dad and mom come to me and say, hey, we're moving to Washington State. And I'm like, no, we aren't. You may be moving, but I'm not. And I was grateful that my dad, he says, well, let's go up to Washington and look and experience it. And then we'll let you make the decision. Well, the decision was already made. I wasn't moving, but he kind of went through this and let me make the call. And I remember seeing my dad tearing up, just saying, son, you'll learn that family is everything. Your friends may feel like they're the world to you, but family is everything. I'm like, yeah, whatever, Dad. Sure, family's everything. And my dad now, I reach out to my dad every day. I'm talking to my dad about all kinds of stuff. And he is, I would probably say, my number one mentor, my number one resource. If something great happens, I want to share it with my dad. And growing up, my dad was just the disciplinarian, because again, he had all these girls that he loved. As a father that has daughters, I get. And now we are very, very close. So he is and was number one for me. John Curtis worked, Congressman Curtis. He was a neighbor and a friend, and we worked together for 18 months. And there's so many John Curtis-isms in my life from that 18-month period that he's one from a business side that was really, really instrumental. And on my post, I talk about little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. He was the one that shared that, because I was having one of those days where my kids were just driving me crazy. They were little. And he's just like, just remember, keep it in perspective, And so those are two that come to mind. I've been really, really blessed though with guys like you, my brother-in-law, Jared Stewart, that I worked with, and my current business partner, Logan Wilkes, a lot of amazing men that are trying to be great men first, and dads second, and then businessmen third, that I've leaned on in a lot of ways.
Jeff, one of the things that I love to ask people is, did they have any mantras or family sayings? Because I dig those, and I have them with my family. Is there some of those that you have in the Rust family?
Well, I remember with, having all these boys, I heard something one time that totally resonates. If you've got a bunch of boys, you'll get this. And it's one boy, one brain, two boys, half a brain, three boys, no brain at all. And so there are things that will go on. And it's like, what were you thinking? And they're like, I don't know. It just happened, And so James Clark, who's a friend and neighbor, and they've got three kids, two girls and a boy. And he says, we'll send Jack over for his testosterone shot. Come hang out with the Rust boys. and one day he was dropping him off and he goes, remember, DDDT. And I said, Jack, what's a DDDT? And he's like, don't do dumb things. And now when you've got one boy, one brain, two boys, half a brain, three boys, no brain at all, DDDT is like, hey, it's our way of saying I love you to them, because when they're going out, just don't do dumb things. So DDDT.
I like that. and from a dad of twin boys, we're dealing with a half a brain all the time because they're always together. As they get older, they get more ideas. So I love them.
You talked earlier about, you mentioned picking the right friends. I think that's something that we all deal with. All of us have had times when our kids, we feel like are picking the wrong friend. Sometimes my kids say, yeah, but I'm the good influence. I'm going to bring them up. And I think, okay, yeah, well, that's probably true. And I'm grateful for that, but I'm still scared out of my mind that you're going down the wrong path with the wrong friend. Any thoughts on that?
So a couple of things. Number one, I have a son that's incredibly social, and like he can walk into a room, light it up, and he has a gazillion friends. And then my oldest son has one or two really, really good friends. And I've learned that it isn't quantity as much as it's quality. And I think we all kind of know that. And having conversations with them that's one of the conversations every time we talk about your friends. What are the good things that are happening and what are some of the bad things? And, there are times when they're lifting you and you're lifting them, and what percentage is the positive versus the negative, and actually getting real with them so that they can see it and kind of analyze it. And then I asked them, are there any things that you would do differently with your friend group? And they talk about it. Like, yeah, there's a lot of drama going on with so-and-so. And, I wish we could kind of cut that out. And like, okay, well, how would you do it? How would you do it? Like, what would you change if you had a magic wand? And just having that time where they can kind of think about it, because when they're with their friend saying, hey, I don't want to be your friend anymore, or I want to have a better situation, that's the wrong time to be in analysis mode. So that's one thing. The second thing is my wife always feeds them if she likes them. If she doesn't want that friend around, it's not quite as warm and welcoming, so that everyone knows there's always food at the Rust House. And then if there's certain situations where it's not, be like, hey, what was the deal? You say, well, some friends we want to have around more often than others. And kind of a subtle way of making it feel that way. And fortunately, that doesn't happen very, very often. But, it just sends a message to them of how we feel.
I was actually really surprised the other day. I have three teenagers at home, and we were talking about some of the things that come up at high school and things that we never, it wasn't even on my radar in high school. Like my daughter was telling me that she knows kids that are doing cocaine in high school. Like, one, where do they get the money to buy cocaine? And two, where are they buying it? If I had to go find cocaine, I don't think I wouldn't have the first idea where to go find hard drugs like that, but they're floating around our high schools. And that was the first time that I'd ever had that discussion. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that, wow, my daughter's been carrying this around. She sits next to people in English class that are doing hard drugs, and I haven't talked to her about that yet. Like, that's a pretty heavy thing for a kid to wrap their head around. She hasn't been doing them with them. That's great. Right. And that's my opportunity to say, way to go, sweetheart, like I'm proud of you. But it also hit me like I'm behind here. There's things that I don't even know are going on in these high schools that our kids are dealing with that we never even saw. So it's a good reminder, I think, to all of us that the friends that our kids are hanging around, the people that they're spending time around, greatly influence the things that they see and the things that they do and the choices that they make. So that's a great reminder.
There's two things that we found on finding out to getting kids to talk naturally. When you've got kids that you're taking in carpool, if you turn the music on loud in the back of the car, they'll raise the volume with which they talk, and you can hear everything they'll say. And they don't, because the music's on and they're just in their natural environment. That's one thing. The second thing is if we have food and we feed them. So my wife, it's like 2 or 3 times a week. The kids come home from school and bring as many friends as they want. So there's anywhere from 10 to 15 kids that will come and eat. During lunchtime, it's as if you're not even there, because they're in lunchroom mode, and they're just talking and socializing. And then you get all kinds of nuggets of things that then you can bring up and have conversations when it's the right time.
Those are some good dad hacks, parent hacks.
There you go.
Totally.
Sneaky Jeff.
Yep.
Getting the conversations from the back row of the Suburban. That's awesome.
We're going to have to end with our last question here, Jeff, the one we always end with, and that is, what does it mean to you to be a gentleman?
I just think, and this may go back to me talking a little bit about my kids, that some of the proudest moments are when they stand up for those that can't stand up for themselves. And a lot of it comes from the fact that my kids have been blessed with great physical characteristics. And when they stand up for somebody that can't stand up for themselves and defend them and protect them, that to me is what it means to be a gentleman. And, obviously, oftentimes women are the ones that we're defending in a lot of ways, but sometimes it's a kid that's getting bullied or picked on. And so to me, that's what it means to stand up.
Jeff Russ, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. So many good things that you've taught us, and great things that we can use in our own lives as we raise our own kids and teach them how to be ladies and gentlemen. If people want to engage with you and your company, how do they do so?
They can go to www.TRUSS.com.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. If you like the podcast, please don't hesitate to go over to Apple Podcasts, like and subscribe, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Give us a listen, rating, review. That sure helps us, and we appreciate it very much. Thanks so much. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Be a gentleman.